Hi everyone! In this lesson, we will go over the definition of a histogram, how to create a histogram with the right interval, and how to interpret a histogram. So a histogram is a type of graph that shows the frequency distribution of data within equal intervals. Let's take a look at the histogram on the right to see what equal intervals mean. The intervals used on this histogram are 1 to 10, 11 to 20, and so on. And there are 10 numbers grouped together in each interval. Unlike a bar graph, there are no gap or space between the bars in a histogram because it displays data in groups. See, both examples on the right has no gaps in between the bars except the front where numbers don't begin with 0. Furthermore, a histogram does not show specific data values. It only shows the number of values within an interval. For example, this histogram shows that 60 students can hold their breath 1 to 10 seconds. However, we don't know exactly how many students can hold their breath for 8, 9, or 10 seconds. Now, because a histogram displays data values in groups, it is helpful to represent huge numerical data sets easily. We cannot create a histogram for categorical data because we cannot sort categorical data like dogs and cats from least to greatest. You can also change the interval of a histogram to see which interval choice gives a better description of a dataset. Remember, the more a histogram imitates the shape of a line plot, the better a histogram is to describe a dataset. So how do we decide the intervals for a histogram? Remember, the goal of a histogram is to group numbers together and still show a similar distribution to a line plot. So, a good rule of thumb is to have 5 to 10 bars in a histogram. This is just a suggestion. It is okay to use more or less bars as needed. Intervals can be determined by using the range of the dataset divided by the desired number of bars needed. Now, make sure all the intervals have the same amount of values in it. Let's compare the interval groups below. For 0 to 3, the data values include 0, 1, 2, and 3. For 4 to 6, the data values include 4, 5, and 6. They are different as one includes 4 data values while the other only include 3 data values. Now for the example on the right, for 1 to 3, the data values include 1, 2, and 3. For 4 to 6, the data values include 4, 5, and 6. Since both include the same amount of data, this is the correct way to group numbers into equal interval. And if you're ever confused, just list the data included in each interval to check. Now, this is a tip. If a dataset begins with a large minimum value, it is okay to begin your interval with the minimum value that's not 0, such as the tree heights example above, which begins with 100. Just make sure to leave a space before making the first bar to show that you are not starting with 0. Now let's take a look at the Histogram Example One. The question says 15 people were asked to state the number of hours they exercised in a 7-day period. The results of the survey are listed below. Make a frequency table and histogram to display the data. The first thing we should do is to find the range of this data, which is 13 minus 2, and it is 11. Since it is a small data set, it's better to create a histogram with less bars. So let's do 5 bars. So the range, 11, divided by 5 will give us about 3 per interval if we loosely round the number up. Let's first try the intervals 1 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 9, 10 to 12, and 13 to 15. This interval will work for all the numbers except 6.5 as it falls in between the second and third interval, so this won't work. Now we have 2 choices. We can group intervals into halves, or let's go easy and regroup the numbers starting with 0, which will give us 0 to 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 8, 9 to 11, and 12 to 14. This interval choice will allow all data values to fit nicely into a group. Now, there's 1 data value that goes into 0 to 2. There are 2 data values that go into 3 to 5. There are 5 data values that go into 6 to 8. There are also 5 data values that go into 9 to 11. And there are 2 data values that go into 12 to 14. Now, let's graph the frequency table. The title of this graph is the number of hours 15 people exercise in 7 days. The x-axis represents the hour of exercise, which the intervals can be listed like the frequency table or marked by the beginning of each interval. The y-axis represents the frequency of people. Since we begin at 0, there will be no space at the beginning of the graph and thereafter. Now that we are done, let's conclude. Looking at the histogram above, you can see that same amount of people, 5 people, reported that they exercise between 6 to 8 hours or 9 to 11 hours each week. There are 2 people reported for each 3 to 5 and 12 to 14 hours of exercise per week. And 0 to 2 hours of exercise per week has the least frequency, which is only reported by 1 person.